What if the most terrifying storms in life reveal who we truly trust? What if fear grows loudest precisely when God seems silent? And what if one moment on a dark lake completely changes the disciples' understanding of who Jesus really is? Luke chapter 8 tells the story of a storm that began like an ordinary journey. Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side of the lake." Simple words, nothing dramatic, nothing that sounded dangerous. The disciples obeyed, climbed into the boat, and began crossing the Sea of Galilee together. Several of these men were experienced fishermen. They understood the lake well. They knew how to navigate changing winds, shifting waters, and difficult conditions. Boats were familiar territory for them, and Jesus himself was with them. At first, everything likely felt peaceful. The sound of water against the boat, the rhythm of rowing, the cool night air, the quiet confidence of experienced sailors. Then something changed suddenly. Luke says a squall came down on the lake. The Sea of Galilee sat below sea level, surrounded by hills and valleys that could create violent storms without warning. Cold air rushing through the surrounding terrain often collided with warm air above the water, producing dangerous winds rapidly. What began calmly became terrifying quickly. Waves crashed against the boat, water poured inside. The wind howled across the darkness, and the disciples realized something frightening. They were in real danger. Luke says the boat was being swamped and they were in great peril. And where was Jesus during all of this? Sleeping. That detail feels almost unbelievable. The disciples panicked while Jesus slept peacefully through the storm. And honestly, many people understand that emotional tension deeply. Life can suddenly shift without warning. A diagnosis, a financial collapse, a broken relationship, an unexpected loss, a season of anxiety or depression, a crisis nobody prepared for. And during those moments, God can seem strangely silent. People pray desperately while heaven feels quiet. Fear grows louder, questions multiply, and like the disciples, many silently wonder, does God even see what is happening? The disciples finally woke Jesus with desperate words, "Master, Master, we're going to drown." Notice something important. These were not weak men unfamiliar with danger. Experienced fishermen believed the situation was beyond human control. The storm was stronger than their skill, and sometimes God allows people to reach moments where human strength becomes insufficient, moments where control disappears, moments exposing how fragile life truly is. Storms reveal things comfort often hides: fear, dependence, faith, pride, weakness. When life feels stable, people often assume they are in control. But storms expose how limited human control really is. Then Jesus stood up, and with astonishing authority he rebuked the wind and raging waters. Immediately the storm stopped, the waves calmed, the wind ceased, and suddenly the lake became completely still. Imagine the silence after such chaos. Moments earlier, terror dominated the boat. Now absolute calm surrounded them. Then Jesus asked the disciples a piercing question. Where is your faith? Not why are storms happening? Not why are you afraid? But where is your faith? That question reaches far beyond the boat on the Sea of Galilee, because storms still confront every human life eventually. And often the deeper issue becomes not the storm itself, but where people place trust during it. Faith does not mean pretending storms are harmless. The disciples truly were in danger. The waves were real. The fear felt real. But Jesus challenged their failure to remember who was in the boat with them. And perhaps that remains one of the greatest struggles believers face today. People often focus so intensely on the size of the storm that they forget the presence of God beside them. Fear narrows vision. It magnifies danger while minimizing God's power. But Jesus revealed authority over forces human beings cannot control. Wind obeyed him, water obeyed him, creation itself responded to his command. And this left the disciples asking one of the most important questions in the Gospel of Luke. Who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him. That question matters deeply, because the miracle was not merely about calming weather. It revealed Jesus' identity. Throughout the Old Testament, God alone controlled seas and storms. The sea often symbolized chaos, danger, and uncontrollable power in ancient Jewish understanding. Yet Jesus spoke to creation with divine authority. Not through rituals, not through struggle, not through effort, simply by command. And creation obeyed instantly. This miracle revealed that Jesus was far more than a teacher, prophet, or moral example. The disciples began realizing they were standing before someone possessing authority belonging to God himself, and that realization changed everything. This story also reveals something powerful about fear. Fear itself is not unusual. Even faithful people experience fear. The disciples followed Jesus personally and still panicked during the storm. Faithful people today also struggle with anxiety, uncertainty, and fear during difficult seasons. The issue is not whether fear appears, the issue becomes what fear drives people toward. Does fear push people toward deeper dependence on God, or toward despair and hopelessness? Storms often reveal spiritual maturity more clearly than peaceful seasons do. Calm conditions rarely expose the heart fully, but crises reveal hidden foundations. When pressure rises, people discover what they truly trust. Some trust money until financial collapse comes. Some trust health until illness appears. Some trust relationships until betrayal happens. Some trust personal strength until exhaustion overwhelms them. Storms expose unstable foundations, and many people spend years building lives around temporary security without realizing how fragile those foundations actually are. Jesus was teaching the disciples something essential. Faith anchored in him can survive storms because his authority exceeds the storm itself. That does not mean believers avoid suffering entirely. Christians still experience loss, pain, uncertainty, and hardship. The disciples still entered the storm, even with Jesus beside them. Following God does not guarantee an easy life, but it does mean storms no longer possess ultimate authority. Another powerful detail is that Jesus himself initiated the journey. Let us go over to the other side. The disciples were in the storm while obeying Jesus. That matters because many people assume hardship always means they are outside God's will. But sometimes storms happen precisely while following him faithfully. Obedience does not eliminate difficulty. In fact, some of the hardest seasons come during sincere faithfulness. And that reality confuses many believers. People often expect God's presence to mean immediate comfort and smooth circumstances. But throughout Scripture, God frequently works deeply through trials instead. Storms develop dependence, humility, perseverance, trust, and they reveal whether faith depends mainly on favorable circumstances. Anyone can praise God during calm seasons. Storms reveal deeper roots. This story also highlights human limitation. The disciples could not control the storm despite experience and effort. Modern culture often celebrates self-sufficiency and personal control constantly. People are taught they can manage everything with enough knowledge, planning, or determination. But life repeatedly exposes limits. There are storms human beings cannot fix alone. Disease, death, natural disaster, emotional collapse, brokenness inside the human soul. And eventually people confront realities beyond personal power. That can feel terrifying initially, but it can also become the beginning of deeper trust. Because dependence on God begins where illusions of total self-control end. Another fascinating detail is Jesus sleeping during the storm. His peace contrasted sharply with the disciples' panic. Why? Because Jesus understood something the disciples had not fully grasped yet. The storm never threatened his authority. Chaos did not create fear within him because he remained sovereign over it. That image becomes deeply comforting for believers. While humans panic, God remains neither surprised nor powerless. Nothing catches him off guard. No storm overwhelms him. No crisis removes his authority. And though his timing sometimes confuses people, his presence remains constant even when he appears silent. This story also invites honest reflection. What storms currently exist in your life? Fear about the future, financial pressure, loneliness, health concerns, family conflict, emotional exhaustion, spiritual doubt. Every person eventually faces waves large enough to expose fear. And during those moments, Jesus' question still echoes, where is your faith? Not as condemnation alone, but invitation. Will fear become greater than trust? Will circumstances define reality completely? Or will people remember who holds authority even over chaos itself? Another beautiful truth here is that Jesus responded even to imperfect faith. The disciples panicked, doubted, feared, yet Jesus still acted. That matters because many believers wrongly assume they need perfect faith before approaching God. But throughout the Gospels, Jesus consistently responded to weak, struggling, incomplete faith honestly reaching toward him. Faith is not measured by emotional calmness alone. Sometimes faith simply cries out desperately, "Lord, help us," and Jesus hears. This passage also foreshadows deeper spiritual truth. Humanity itself lives within a larger storm called sin, brokenness, and death. People cannot calm that storm through human effort alone, but Jesus came possessing authority greater than chaos itself, authority to forgive sin, defeat evil, overcome death, restore peace between humanity and God. The calming of the storm becomes a glimpse of the larger salvation he came to bring. Peace beyond circumstances, hope stronger than fear, authority greater than chaos. This miracle also transformed the disciples gradually. Notice their reaction after the storm. They were amazed and fearful simultaneously. Why? Because they realized Jesus was more powerful than they previously understood. Sometimes people want God only powerful enough to solve problems while remaining comfortable and predictable personally. But encounters with God's true authority create awe. The disciples realized they were not merely traveling with a wise teacher. They were witnessing divine power. And genuine encounters with God still produce reverence today. Another important lesson is that storms eventually pass. The disciples likely believed in the middle of the storm that destruction was inevitable, but the storm did not last forever, and many difficult seasons in life feel permanent while people are inside them. Pain distorts perspective, fear magnifies hopelessness, yet God often carries people through seasons they once thought impossible to survive. Not always easily, not always quickly, but faithfully. Many believers later recognized that storms transformed them deeply, not because suffering itself was good, but because God worked within it powerfully. Faith became deeper, prayer became more real, dependence on God became stronger, compassion toward others increased. The storm revealed what comfort never could. And perhaps someone watching now feels trapped inside a storm emotionally, spiritually, or physically. Maybe fear feels overwhelming. Maybe prayers seem unanswered. Maybe God feels distant or silent. This story offers hope. The disciples thought the storm controlled everything, but Jesus remained Lord over the storm the entire time. And the same remains true today. No wave rises beyond his authority. No darkness exceeds his power. No chaos escapes his notice. That does not mean life becomes instantly easy, but it means fear does not get final authority. Jesus does. And perhaps the most powerful part of this story is not merely that Jesus calmed the storm around the disciples. It is that his presence offered peace within the storm itself. Even before the waves stopped, the Son of God remained in the boat beside them. And for believers today, that promise still matters profoundly. God's presence does not always remove storms immediately, but his presence means people never face them alone. Thank you for watching this video. If this message encouraged your faith, please like this video, share it with someone who may need hope during a difficult season, and subscribe to Holy Path Insights for more biblical teachings that strengthen hearts and deepen trust in God. May the Lord calm every fearful heart, strengthen your faith during life's storms, and remind you that he still holds authority over every wind and wave.